What's up guys, Justin here for S&S Archery. Today's gear video, we're going to be looking at a customized black gold sight that we are now offering as a stock item here at S&S Archery. Today's gear video, we're going to be looking at the S&S Backcountry Pro Dual Trac. Alright guys, in this video we're going to be looking at the S&S Backcountry Pro Dual Trac. We're really excited about this sight for a couple reasons. Number one, obviously having it as a stock item is going to save you 5 to 6 months wait time if you wanted to do any kind of customization on the sight. And number two, just the changes that we made with the sight. So to start out, taking a look at it, what we've done is we've added a 4-inch V3X compatible dovetail. So instead of the X-frame base, the wing truss, we're using the dovetail. We use this also on our S&S Backcountry Pro Hunter, which you guys may have some knowledge about. I'll go ahead and post this up right here. This is going to be available in a 3-pin or a 5-pin horizontal sight. We wanted to see it with the 4-inch dovetail. So if you have that newer Matthews bow, it's going to fit in there very nice. We went with the dovetail for a couple of reasons. One, that Matthews bow. And number two, the adjustment and the price point of the 4-inch dovetail over the wing truss. What is nice about the dovetail is it gives you all the range that wing truss does, being able to slide this sight in and out to get the right sight picture and the visibility that you want to see on your scope housing. Another big change that we made is on the pins themselves. So as you can see here, the Dual Trac features a 2-pin inline system. The top pin is a green 19 thousandths and the bottom pin is a green 10 thousandths. The stock models featured a green 19 and a 19 in a red as your second pin. So we've changed that up. Really like the setup. Having that smaller 10 thousandths pin on the bottom really helps you at those longer distances. You're not covering up, the pin itself isn't covering up a lot of the target. So you're able to really dial in on those longer shots. Why did we go green and green? For a lot of people, the red is hard to see and so is yellow. The green just seems to not starburst the most. It just ends up being, in our opinion, kind of the best pin color to really be crisp and clean. So that's why we went with 2 green pins. I personally use a single pin, just wasn't enough for a hunting situation. Anytime that animal would bump out, I had to let back down, re-range, dial, then pull back and shoot. And that's just too much going on. So having a 2-pin system, kind of have a backup. So if that animal ever bumps, you can make the shot. So very nice setup. One of the things I wanted to do when I was shooting this and testing it out was figure out the overall pin gap, how far I was going to be able to shoot from my top pin in between to my second pin. And for me, with my setup, I'm running about 289 feet per second on my RX-7. What I was able to come up with was about 17 to 18 yards pin difference. So for me, I set it up at 30 yards for my top pin and 45 for my bottom. This is going to give me pretty much complete coverage of that archery range, especially for elk. Most of the times, all my shots have been from 20 to 40, so I'm pretty well covered with that range. If you have a slower setup, your pin gaps are definitely going to be shorter, probably around that 12 to 15 yard range. And then if you have a faster setup, definitely you can increase that pin gap. You might even get 20 yards on that setup. The S&S Backcountry Pro Dual Trac is based off of the Pro Sight models. So you are going to see I do have my micro gang adjustment for my windage and my elevation. You don't get that micro adjustment in the pin itself. And with the adjustment of the pins, your top pin remains centered in the housing and does not move, but the bottom pin can be adjusted. So that's where you're getting the pin gap adjustment. Here on the bottom, on the inside part of the scope housing, you're going to see that chrome looking screw. You're going to back that out, and then here on the bottom, second notch here, you're going to have a little spot for an Allen key to go in and make that adjustment to close or lengthen that pin gap. The S&S Backcountry Pro Dual Trac is a fully adjustable sliding sight, meaning the actual housing is going to move up and down through this dial system. And then within this setup, you're going to get 52 sight tapes. These are going to correspond to your arrow's ballistics. Once you figure that out, they're going to go here on your indicator, which you do see on this sight 2 of the needles, one for the top pin and one for the bottom. I really like being able to look up, glance. You have that 45-degree window here, so as I'm pulled back, I can still look up at my indicators and make sure I'm on the right yardage before I make that shot. So top indicator, works with the top pin, bottom indicator for the bottom pin. We have a whole video explanation of how to get the sight tape set up on your bow. I'll go ahead and put the link right here. So if you guys have purchased this, you can watch the video and help you out in sighting this in. So a couple more things that I'll mention about the sight. You do have your first, second, and third axis adjustment. So very important on that initial setup, making sure everything's in line, centered up with your riser, your string, that first and second axis, and then having the third axis adjustment here on the base. Helps with those angles, shooting downhill, uphill. Anytime you change that angle, your bubble's gonna wanna float. So getting the correct canter pitch in your scope housing is key. Probably the last thing I'll mention about the sight itself is you do have the photochromatic shell integrated here. So very similar to the single pin version. This is going to eliminate that harsh light coming in. It's gonna kind of combat it. So as I step out in a bright light situation, this top shell is going to turn to a purple hue. It's going to block a lot of those harsh rays coming into the fiber optics. It's going to really help make that pin not starburst or wash out. What is also nice is if I come into a dark situation, it's going to open up, change to a clear look, and it's going to allow those fiber optics to really gather in as much light as possible. Overall, very impressed with the S&S Backcountry Pro Dual Trac. I've been shooting it a lot. Definitely going to be shooting it this year. I'm very confident with the 2 pins, having the ability to set those pin gaps and that 19 thousandths on the top, 10 on the bottom. You're going to get great light on the pin early in the morning in that 19 thousandths. And that bottom pin is just going to be very accurate at those longer distances. Honestly, I think this sight's going to be perfect for guys that have a faster bow setup. They can definitely shoot that 30-yard shot at 20, be 3 inches high. Not a big deal, aim just a touch low. But having that overall coverage from 30 to 45 like I've got set up on my bow, I feel very confident as an elk hunter. Most of my shots, when that elk comes in, I'm going to be in range. But ultimately, I think this is going to be perfect for guys stalking in on a mule deer hunt. They know where that buck's bedded. They range that spot, and if for some reason the deer or whatever bumps out 10, 15 yards, you have a second pin to make the shot. So definitely going to be an awesome setup. If you guys have any questions about the S&S Backcountry Pro Dual Trac, please feel free to give us a call, shoot us an email, we'd be glad to help. Thanks for watching, guys.